Hospitals near capacity, schools forced to close. As Texas faces the ongoing Omicron surge, there's already push to prepare for the next wave.
There can easily be other variants that come our way. Just because you've had a mild case of it doesn't mean that you're protected.
How some organizations are finding funds to convince more Texans to get the vaccine, who they're targeting, and is it working? A new round begins in the battle over voting rights bills in Washington.
The voices of many Texans are being diluted and silenced, especially Latinos.
We dig deeper into the fight over federal election legislation.
We don't need the federal government to tell Texas how to run its elections.
Why people in both parties have concerns about the long-term impact. A push to reduce penalties for possessing pot. The idea will be on the ballot in some Texas cities. How a comment from the governor highlights statewide support for reducing restrictions on marijuana.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Schools across Texas are facing challenges from the surge of COVID-19 cases. The increase of staff members calling out sick is affecting everything from cafeteria service to class sizes and even canceling school. Marble Falls ISD superintendent made the decision to cancel school on Friday. More than 70 of the district's staff members have tested positive for COVID since January 3rd, and the district has only about half the subs they need to cover for teachers who are out. In North Texas, Mansfield ISD closed 6 elementary school campuses due to extra absences and a shortage of substitutes. This follows similar steps taken at campuses in Maypearl ISD and Boyd ISD. They hope to reopen the campuses Tuesday. Liberty Hill ISD superintendent put out a video to parents asking any volunteers to help them out, saying their COVID cases are doubling daily. Several other districts across the state made similar pleas. Hospitals are still struggling with staffing amid the surge. In Amarillo, the chief medical officer at Northwest Texas Hospital put in a request for a FEMA strike team to help. He says some patients have to wait for emergency care.
This morning, we had 13 patients in our emergency room that were holding for beds. That's consistent. We're always in double digits. And we know that there are 43 patients out in the region who are waiting to get to a higher level of care. Half of them are people who are suffering from COVID right now.
A number of hospitals temporarily stopped doing elective procedures and are even postponing some surgical procedures because of staff shortages. Scientists tracking the COVID outbreak last week discovered a new mutated form of the Omicron variant in South Texas. Our Border Report team talked with leaders in Hidalgo County about the discovery. Health officials say this new subvariant is not cause for concern yet.
Now, is it more serious? Is it more illness? No, it's just a different molecular structure. You know, Mother Nature is very powerful. Mother Nature is going to win at the end, okay? You could divert a river, you could block a river, you can, build things around the river, but at the end, the water is going to get to where it wants to go. Well, viruses are part of Mother Nature. Viruses adapt, change.
The Texas Department of State Health Services is still working to get more people vaccinated. They're offering financial help to groups across the state that are willing to help promote the COVID vaccine in rural and underserved communities. Maggie Glenn spoke with an organization that received part of that funding and outlines how they've used it so far.
Printing, getting resource information out, that's a big one.
For the past 3 months, the Texas Familias Council has been distributing pamphlets like this, urging more of their community to get vaccinated and dispelling misinformation about the shot.
With immigrant and Latino, Spanish-speaking communities, that can be a very, very difficult challenge to overcome because they don't have access to all the information at the time that most English speakers do.
The group has already been serving their community for the past decade, which can help get through to those who are still hesitant.
People want to have a trusted source.
The Texas Familias Council is also spending the money to hire more volunteers to spread the word.
Hiring community outreach educators that can spend that one-on-one time to sit down and talk with families or attend a PTA meeting or go to a homeowners association meeting.
And setting up convenient vaccine clinics.
Sometimes it's not hesitancy because of any particular belief. It's people have just put it off because they're working very hard and they just haven't had the time to go and get a vaccination shot.
While new vaccinations are too late to curb the current Omicron surge, doctors say it's still crucial to fight future variants.
There can easily be other variants that come our way. Just because you've had a mild case of it doesn't mean that you're protected, and doesn't mean that you can't transmit the next variant to somebody that you really, really care about.
Maggie Glenn for State of Texas.
The grants range from $50,000 to $150,000. DSHS already awarded one round of grants in the fall. The deadline to apply for the second round is January 28th. We want to give you a closer look at how vaccination rates differ between rural counties and more populated parts of Texas. In the Austin area, more than 70% of the 1.2 million people living in Travis County are fully vaccinated. That's the highest rate in Central Texas. Hayes has over 63% and Williamson over 69%. Both areas have populations over 225,000. But beyond those counties, vaccination rates trail off a bit. Nearly 51% of people are fully vaccinated in Blanco County, which has a population of just over 11,000 people. Over 53% of people in Burnett County are fully vaccinated, and nearly 59% in Bastrop County. Some of the places hit hardest by the pandemic in Texas are rural communities. For insight into the reasons why, Maggie spoke with Dr. David Lakey. He's a member of the Texas Medical Association's COVID Task Force, digging into data about the effect of the virus in rural parts of the state.
A lot of these areas have less resources, and so if they are ill, it's harder for them to care for themselves. It's harder for them to stay home in the midst of a pandemic. A lot of individuals don't have sick leave and can't just stay home, and don't have the resources just to continue on when they are ill. In underserved areas, many times you have multi-generational families, and so it's very easy to spread the virus and to not only themselves, to their kids, to their parents, to their grandparents, all living in close proximity. And so the more that we can do to prevent the disease in the first place, the better off we're going to be. And I think most of these individuals aren't against vaccine. There's just been so much misinformation on Facebook, on Twitter, and social media. It may not be perfect in preventing all mild disease, but it sure looks very good at preventing severe disease.
Dr. Lakey said he's also concerned about the availability of antibody treatments. He said the demand is high, but supplies are limited right now, leaving some patients waiting for the treatment they need. Austin voters will decide whether to lower penalties for possessing marijuana, but it's not just a big city idea.
Small possession of marijuana is not the type of violation that we want to stockpile jails with.
How a comment from the governor highlights bipartisan backing for easing some restrictions on pot. A campaign school aims to get more women on your ballot. We look at who's getting involved and how it's opening a path for future leaders in Texas. Austin voters will decide whether to decriminalize low-level marijuana offenses in the city. The group Ground Game Texas used the petition process to get the item on the ballot in May. It would prevent police from ticketing or arresting people for possessing small amounts of marijuana. You may be thinking, sure, this is something you'd expect from liberal voters in Austin, but similar ideas are also gaining traction at the Republican-dominated state level of government.
One thing that I believe in, and I believe the state legislature believes in, and that is prison and jail is a place for dangerous criminals who may harm others. And small possession of marijuana is not the type of violation that we want to stockpile jails with.
The governor made those comments at a campaign event in Edinburgh. His position is in line with the views of a growing number of Texans who agree with policies to reduce penalties for marijuana possession. The Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas has been asking voters about their views on marijuana for more than a decade. In 2010, their poll found 27% of Texans believed that marijuana should not be legal under any circumstances. When they asked the question again last summer, the number dropped to just 13% of Texans. But the poll found different levels of what Texans are willing to accept when it comes to looser marijuana laws. Just over a quarter of voters said that marijuana should be legal legal only for medical purposes. 31% believe possession of small amounts for any purpose should be legal. 29% support full legalization of marijuana. To be clear, the drug is still illegal at the state level, and efforts to decriminalize or legalize marijuana face big roadblocks in the Texas legislature. In 2019, the Texas House passed HB 63, a bill to reduce criminal penalties for possessing small amounts of pot. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick immediately shut it down. He took to social media to declare the bill dead in the Texas Senate and voiced support for lawmakers who stood against reducing penalties for marijuana possession. Similar legislation also died in the Senate last session, but lawmakers did pass a bill to expand the state's medical marijuana program to include people with cancer and post-traumatic stress disorder. Governor Abbott signed that bill into law last May. Women in Texas make up more than half the population, but a much smaller percentage hold public office. How the University of Texas could help change that trend with a program aimed at cultivating candidates.
The voices of many Texans are being diluted and silenced, especially Latinos.
A new round begins in the battle over voting rights legislation in Washington. We dig deeper into the plan to change Senate rules to move voting bills forward. Why people in both parties worry about the long-term impact. Last year, Texas lawmakers passed major changes to the state's election laws. Republicans who led the legislation say the changes make it easier to vote but harder to cheat. Democrats who fought the plan say the new laws unfairly restrict how and when voters can cast ballots. Last week, President Joe Biden launched a new effort to undo some of those changes. On Tuesday, the president gave a fiery speech calling on Congress to pass federal voting rights legislation.
Will we choose democracy over autocracy, light over shadows, justice over injustice? I know where I stand. I will not yield. I will not flinch. I will defend the right to vote, our democracy against all enemies, foreign and, yes, domestic.
The president is pushing the U.S. Senate to undo its filibuster rules to clear the path for legislation that's been stalled amid the division on Capitol Hill. But the Biden plan could get shut down by people in his own party. Washington correspondent Anna Wiernicki takes a closer look.
The motion is passed.
On Thursday, House lawmakers passed a consolidated package that includes two voting bills, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
Every American has an equal and fair right to vote.
Texas Democratic Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia says the two bills would reverse Republican-led laws in states like Texas that she says limit access to the ballot box.
The voices of many Texans are being diluted and silenced, especially Latinos.
But as the measure heads to the Senate, Republicans, including Texas Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, say they don't support it.
We don't need the federal government to tell Texas how to run its elections.
It's a bill designed to keep Democrats in power forever.
President Biden huddled with Senate Democrats on Capitol Hill Thursday afternoon to encourage Democrats to change the Senate rules and pass the election bills with only a simple majority.
We're trying to come to a place where 50 senators can support two bills.
But in order to make that happen, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he needs the support of all 50 Senate Democrats. And Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema say they aren't convinced.
And while I continue to support these bills, I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country.
In Washington, I'm Anna Wiernicki.
We want to take a deeper dive into the effort to change Senate filibuster rules. We're going to hear more from Texas Senator John Cornyn. He's a Republican, and as you'd expect, he opposes the president's plan. But Cornyn pointed out potential long-term effects that could eventually hurt the people who want to change the rules.
What that is just a rule in the Senate that forces us to do things that maybe don't come natural, like working together and building bipartisan consensus. I think people generally would like to see Congress work better, which means that you can't just do things on a partisan basis. And when you do, you're likely to make sure that the next time the majority changes, as it always will, eventually, that the rules get changed back once again. And so there creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos, difficulty of people to plan their lives, small businesses included. And so this is a common sense rule that forces us to do things in a bipartisan way. But Democrats so badly want a permanent partisan advantage. They want to blow up those rules. I think they would rue the day that they did. They would come to regret that.
Some Democrats are worried about the potential pitfalls of changing the filibuster rules if Republicans regain power, but a lot of them believe it's worth the risk. We talked to State Representative Ron Reynolds. He's one of the Texas Democrats who broke quorum last summer and went to Washington to push for federal voting rights legislation. He told us why he believes Democrats in D.C. should push to change the rules.
And I do understand that the pendulum will likely shift and Republicans will be back in power, and they will be able to, if this is enacted, to utilize the not having a filibuster to push through some maybe extreme, what they may see extreme legislation. But when I think about the fact that there's nothing more sacred and fundamental in America than the precious right to vote, everything hinges. We've been talking a lot about infrastructure, but voting is the infrastructure of our democracy. So goes voting, so goes our democracy. So if there's anything that we should make a carve-out exception for, it is, in terms of the filibuster, it is voting. And the only reason why I feel so strong about this is because Republicans aren't trying to be statesmen and do what's best for the American people when it comes to voting. They are doing nothing more than trying to win by any means necessary. And that is why you have to take extreme measures.
With the filibuster in place, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act have no realistic path forward in the divided Senate. If the bills do move forward, it would signify one of the biggest overhauls to U.S. elections in a generation. The legislation could strike down laws that tighten rules on elections in 19 mostly Republican states, including Texas. A program at the University of Texas aims to get more women on the ballot.
It's just sort of that push you need to realize that I can be that person too.
How lessons that go beyond the classroom are helping more Texas women hit the campaign trail. Elections coming up later this year in Texas will feature a few first-time candidates who all have one thing in common. They launched their campaigns after attending the LBJ Women's Campaign School at the University of Texas at Austin. Will Dupree took a closer look at the program and found out it's doing more than just helping women in Texas run for office.
I am running to be the next governor of the state of Texas.
Joy Diaz announced in December she'd seek the Democratic nomination for Texas governor. But the former journalist prepared for this run months ago by enrolling in a relatively new program at UT Austin.
I truly believe that change is coming and positive change is coming, and I want to be a part of that.
Diaz is among 120 women who have now gone through the first 2 classes of the LBJ Women's Campaign School.
One of the things that I truly learned that I didn't know perhaps was very important is speaking from the heart. I think voters are hungry for someone who is real.
The LBJ School of Public Affairs houses this program
that trains women who want to become candidates or campaign managers.
Amy Kroll brought forward the idea while working on her master's degree there in 2018.
Women were engaging in their democracy in record numbers, and people were calling that the year of the woman. And I saw all of that happening, and I knew that there was this opportunity to get more women elected into public office.
The campaign school may have drawn its inspiration from the activism that exploded after President Trump's election, but Kroll stresses the program is for women, no matter where they fall on the political spectrum.
I always love the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt where she says, "You must do the thing you think you cannot do." And these women are really stepping into the arena. They are doing the thing.
Only 2 years after the campaign school began, 11 graduates have now launched campaigns of their own here in Texas, Arkansas, and Maryland. Here in Austin, one graduate is now seeking a seat on city council. Stephanie Bazan said she now knows how to better approach one critical task.
Fundraising is hard for a lot of folks, and through Women's Campaign School, I was able to get some tips and tools about how to go about that.
Meanwhile, the two candidates in the Democratic primary for Travis County's 261st Civil District Court judge are both graduates from the campaign school.
There's a lot of other technical things we went over, but at the end of the day, it's getting that realization that a dream is possible, that it's reachable.
We're definitely going to both do our best to win, and we're both going to know that whoever wins, we are still sisters. We're still part of that LBJ sisterhood.
Now, these women face the voters and put to the test everything they learned to become the next generation of leaders. In Austin, Will Dupree, State of Texas.
The next session of the LBJ Women's Campaign School will begin in April and last for about 8 months. Tuition costs $1,750 and financial aid is available. We have more detailed information about what the curriculum includes. Just look for this story in the Texas Politics section of our website. Going in depth now, the Center for American Women and Politics at Rutgers University found that women hold 7 of the 36 seats in the U.S. House. Both Senate seats are held by men. Meanwhile, women fill 48 of the 181 seats in the state legislature. That's the most in the center's database going back to 1975. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.